Okay, this meeting of the board, Milwaukee Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Director Garcia.
Present.
This evening, President Herndon and Director Jackson have asked to be excused. Director Leonard.
Present.
Director O'Halloran.
Here.
Director Seamson.
Present.
Director Zomber.
Present.
And Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
Present.
That is 6 present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. As chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so, and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Perspectiva de las escuelas públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número. Nuevamente, para escuchar esta reunión en español, llame al 312-626-6799 e introduzca el número de reunión 832-0725-4267, seguido por el símbolo de número. Luego, introduzca el código 883149, seguido por el símbolo de número.
Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Monte Edmond, a student from Obama. Christine Goff, a retired school kitchen manager from Story School. Dekai Horton, a student from Westside Academy. Rebecca Hull, a retired teacher from Burroughs Middle School. Desiree Jarvis Sarton, a student from North Division. Ethan Martinez, a student from Spanish Immersion. Marquel Newbern, a student from Wedgwood. Francine Oglesby, a retired educational assistant from Genesis High School. Lamar Parrish, a student from Washington. Jalen Sloan, a student from Hampton. Hattie Thomas, a retired teacher from Milwaukee Environmental Science. And Carol Zandrin, a retired paraprofessional from Stewart School. If we could have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Each month, the Milwaukee Board of School Directors accepts the public's input, both at the committee's meeting and through correspondence submitted to the Office of Board Governance. As this is the regular monthly meeting of the board, however, in accordance with board rules, the board will not be taking public comment. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments, questions, or requests made on the board floor should be directed to the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting this process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and not allowed to return. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to this meeting or access the agenda items online. No one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Minutes, Agendas, and Meetings page on the MPS website and choose Online Agendas. Now let us begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item is action on the minutes of the September 2024 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
If there are no corrections, the minutes will be approved by consensus. I don't see any objections, so, Madam.
Do we have a motion?
Oh, go ahead.
Don't need a motion, sorry.
That's
Okay.
right. I was like, that's different.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director
I don't-
Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Madam Secretary, is there a motion before the floor? I thought we just usually
Approved as
approve as a consent item.
Thank you.
No
Thanks.
worries.
We will move forward.
Okay, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Madam Vice President, we have one communication from the superintendent, the monthly report with possible action of the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it was noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the superintendent please present the report?
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Eduardo Galvan, interim superintendent. We've had a dynamic and productive month filled with significant progress and milestone achievements. First, we completed our third Friday adjustments based on enrollment numbers, submitting our third Friday enrollment count of 64,873 students to the state. As we discussed earlier this week, we successfully completed the adjusted budget for fiscal year 2025 and are now shifting our focus to the initial preparations of fiscal year 2026. We are steadily advancing on our corrective action plan, parallel to finalizing the audit for 23 and begin the audit for 24. Additionally, you heard earlier this week about our long-range facilities master plan. Our consulting firm presented their insights and considerations, providing valuable guidance as we plan ahead. Beyond these operational tasks, I'm especially excited to share what's been happening across the district with our students, who are the core of our mission and the reason behind every effort we make. The activities, achievements, and developments in our schools and around the district this past month truly reflect the vibrant and enriching community we strive to cultivate district-wide. Let me take a moment, just a few of these events. October 5th, our families with children with special needs attended Foro Latino, a free event offering workshops to families who have children with IEPs, the SELF program, discipline and bullying, mental health, and self-care. Families also had an opportunity to access a range of activities, resources, and community agencies. On October 9th, at the MPS Skilled Trade and Technical Career Fair held at Milwaukee Tool, students explored potential career paths in the fields of trade. The event featured 49 vendors and welcomed 594 students from 23 high schools in the district. On October 12th, the Department of Bilingual Multicultural Education hosted our district-wide Hispanic Heritage Month celebration at South Division High School. The event featured 14 schools, represent Spanish-speaking countries, with 261 attendees coming together to enjoy music, food, and fun. On October 14th, the district recognized Indigenous Peoples Day across our schools and on the MPS homepage, where students and the MPS community learned about 12 Native American tribes in Wisconsin. On the 25th of October, a total of 269 middle and high school students from across the district participated in the Student Leadership Summit at UW-Milwaukee. The summit emphasized student voice, identifying areas of student interest that they will focus on this year. And earlier today, more than 200 students attended the GSA Gay and Straight Alliance Student Summit, again at UWM. This event offered workshops to help students understand their rights, plan for college and career, and support mental health and wellness. It is a genuine experience, welcome experience to engage the students as they participate in various arrays of opportunities offered and provided to them. And this concludes my report for October. And I know we have guests here.
Okay. Does the board wish to make any comments? Are you having your guests present under your report, Mr. Galvan?
They're going to report under the Office of Board Governance,
Oh,
but they are
perfect. Okay,
guests
great.
of the
Okay, I
superintendent.
was like, I don't have that in my script, and I don't want to skip over anybody. Okay, perfect. Does the board wish to make any comments? Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the board clerk or Office of Board Governance?
We have 3 reports and communications. The first is the monthly report with possible action from the Board Clerk, Chief Officer, Office of Board Governance. This is an informational item, and although it was noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Great. Could you please present your report?
All right, good evening, everyone. We are I'm grateful to have the opportunity to share a few of our updates, but mostly I'm excited to have our student guests here tonight. So I have attached my official report in the agenda, so I won't go through all of those pieces because I really want them to have that opportunity to speak. But we have officially completed my 3 months of time here, and so I had promised you a report from the Office of Board Governance, and that is included as well. One of the highlights of the past month was getting to hear from the students on their perspectives on the superintendent search. And so tonight we have Zoe Chambers, Jackson Tao, and Manuel Ishag here to share a little bit about their experience in speaking with Dr. Carlton Jenkins about what they would like to see in the superintendent search.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, my name is Manuel Hag. I am the co-president of the SSAC and a proud ambassador for Rufus King International High School.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, my name is Zoe Chambers. I represent Golden Meyer School as a Superintendent Student Advisory Council member.
Oh, hold on one second. I don't think there you go.
Hello.
That is better, yes.
Vice President Herndon, members of the board, my name is Jackson Tao. I'm a LIT and SSAC member representing LIT, Leaders Igniting Transformation Group. I also represent the Owls from Golden Meyer School.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, it is an co-president of the SSAC. It's an honor to be selected here today as officers and ambassadors of the SSAC representing high schools across the district. Student voice is very important to us, and it allows us to improve the high school experience of all students.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Zoe Chambers. On October 9, 2024, our advisor asked us if we would like to participate in a luncheon as student voice representatives for our respective schools and organization where Dr. Jenkins from Hazard, Young, Atia, and Associates. The firm hired to assist with selecting the new superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools. The selected students included students from Black Latino Male Achievement, or BLMA, Leaders Igniting Transformation, LIT, Youth Empowered in the Struggle, YES, Student Athletes, Genders and Sexualities Alliances, or GSA, and other student groups.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Jackson Tao. The luncheon focused on the positive aspects and changes of Milwaukee Public Schools, MPS. Students highlighted their diverse cultural environment, multicultural festivals, and various clubs that cater to students' interests. They emphasized the need for better resource allocation, transparency, and accountability from the next superintendent. Specific issues included budget cuts affecting staffing, the need for dynamic leadership, and the importance of student engagement. Suggestions include involving students in the superintendent selection process, improving school facilities, and fostering relationships with school board members and government officials. The meeting concluded with a call to action for students to advocate for their needs and participate in the selection process.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, my name is Manuel Hag. Just to break this down a bit, when students were asked, quote, what are some challenges and opportunities for improvement within NHS, they expressed concern about the lack of a clear plan for improvement in the district, mentioning financial troubles and school closures. They emphasized the need for transparency and regular updates from the superintendent to the community. They discussed putting students and staff first rather than budget and news headlines. And they mentioned the difficulty of finding specialized teachers, such as fluent German or Spanish teachers, and the impact of budget cuts on staff. When they were asked, quote, what attributes the new superintendent should possess, end quote, students focused on engagement with students, teachers, and the community in the selection process, encouraging students to communicate with school board members and invite government officials to hear their concerns, including diverse perspectives from elementary to high school students in the selection process, honest and transparent communication from the superintendent. They also said it is essential for the superintendent to visit schools and experience the day-to-day challenges firsthand. Dynamic leadership, they also expressed the want for dynamic leadership that learns from the past but focuses on the future with concrete improvement plans.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, my name is Zoe Chambers. Some of the action steps stated by the students attending the luncheon included: reach out to school board members and invite them to talk with students. Organize a meeting where the superintendent candidates can meet and receive student feedback. Ensure the superintendent search process is widely communicated to students and parents. Engage students to engage with their peers and school communities to discuss the superintendent search and share their ideas. Discusses the negative perception of MPS in the community and the need to highlight positive aspects. Involving younger generations in the selection process to ensure their needs are also being considered.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Manuel Hag, co-president of the SSAC. I'd just like to make it clear that the student voice should constantly contribute to the superintendent's search. We do not want this luncheon, which was a very good step forward with regard to the student voice, to be a one-off or just checking a box. We want to be as involved as we possibly can. If given the opportunity, we are eager to put in the time and effort. We want to be present in the room where the interviews occur, present at the deliberations, and provide input and perspective on who should be selected to govern our education and for the foreseeable future. On behalf of the SSAC and the other groups at the luncheon, we want to thank Dr. Tina Owen Moore and Dr. Jenkins specifically for including the student voice in the selection process. This concludes our report. We're here if you have any questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Tina Owen, do you have anything else? Can we hand it over to the board to ask questions?
I think the board should ask questions.
Great. I'm going to open the floor for questions. Yes, Director Zambor.
Thank you, Vice President Gokul Gandhi. Have any of your family members been able to participate in any of the sessions? And if not, what would you like to see us do to help advertise those opportunities to your family members?
I'm going to just refer to you as the SSAC, so SSAC.
Thank you. Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board. My mother is a teacher at MPS, and so she's very involved in the community also. So she had that opportunity as a teacher and as a parent to be involved. And I think the way that it was done, which is having, these open conversations, having these online meetings and stuff, I think that was very effective. I think maybe putting this issue more at the forefront rather than at the end of an email or as, just subtext to a bigger discussion. I think we really need to emphasize that this is a very important decision and that this affects the future of our city because our education makes us who we are, and we are Milwaukee. So I think just really emphasizing the importance of the issue and emphasizing that the board is very receptive to feedback.
Any follow-up, Director Zambor? Yes, Director Simpson.
First of all, just thank you so much for speaking this evening. I've commented to two of my family members recently how invaluable the student voice is to the board and to the future of MPS. My question is, Director Leonard and I have been working on establishing a youth group that can speak directly to board members, and we've had varying degrees of success with organizing that, but I would like to know your opinions, if you have any, or thoughts, if you have any, on the best way to reach out to you, to students, to engage them. Is there a structure to that you think would be easiest for students to participate in? If you have any suggestions or ideas, I'd love to hear them.
SSAC?
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, my name is Zoe Chambers. I would say to that, I'm a big person, like coming in our schools and talking to us, not being afraid to come down at our lunchtime, come sit at our tables. We would love to talk. Kids love to talk. I would say that's like a very effective way and an easy way to get student feedback. Surveys, kids will do them, but we like multiple choice, we like a reward after it. So I would just say simply having a conversation and meeting us where we already are, which is in our schools where most of the time we are. And even our principal, if they're like, oh, the board is here, they might even make an assembly for you guys and we'll just talk to you guys that whole time. So I'm a big person on coming in our schools because yeah, it's a really effective way to talk to many of us at one time.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, I think communication in our district works best when it starts at the top and it naturally works its way down. So I would say maybe going to principals, having them go to staff, and then staff could either recommend students who they think would be positive solution makers who would properly represent the student voice, or perhaps having teachers ask specific students, or present it to the whole class and having students volunteer, fill out some sort of application. But I really think it's from the top, if it works its way down naturally. I think that's how news best gets out in such a big district.
Go ahead.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi and members of the board. Personally, I would say just engaging with the students as an equal rather than oh, I'm your board director and this, I'm just here to talk to you. I feel you should engage with them, come at them and more come at them from a face-to-face kind of sense instead of oh, I'm your board director, I'm just getting feedback. Go meet with them as oh, I want to learn more about you, about your experience, actually I'm actually interested in you as a person. I feel just communicating as an equal will really develop that positive environment for so you can get positive feedback and just greater contribution overall.
Director Simpson?
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your feedback on that, and that certainly gives me some ideas for how to move forward this school year in terms of how we may think of this structure a little bit differently. Thank you so much.
Any other members of the board? Director Leonard?
No questions. Well, yeah, I guess it's a question. So I don't waste a lot of time, so I will probably start calling some of your administrators and moving that process along right after the election is over because time is short. And I like the idea. I've been in a lot of your schools. I've had a chance to speak through a lot of your teachers, going to classrooms and actually having that opportunity over time. So I will bother Director Simpson, and we will make sure we set things up so that we actually are in your buildings, getting input from you, starting conversations, and all those kind of fun things that a former teacher likes to do anyway. So thank you.
Director O'Halloran?
Thank you, Vice President Gokul Gandhi. I don't know who would be the correct person to answer it, but I was just wondering, so I think we have 2 students from Golda Meir, and we have 1 from Rufus King, and I was just wondering about the composition of any of the other high schools or schools that were represented in this dialogue, if there were other, or was it heavily focused with a couple schools, or how did that shake out?
OBG?
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, Director O'Halloran. That was one of the things I was going to highlight, was this was a large group of students from schools all across our district, and they were brilliant and caring and had so much pride in their schools at every one of our buildings. So that was really impressive to me.
Would the SSAC like to comment on that? Go ahead.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, the SSAC in and of itself is a very diverse group with regard to what high schools the students come from. I think we represent all but 4 high schools. Maybe it's lower this year, but we're constantly growing as a group and we're constantly getting more representation. And I think that was shown at the luncheon. So I know there were 2 students from King. I believe these are 2 of the 3 students from Golda who were there. But there were many students from many different affinity groups, many different backgrounds, many different high schools. So.
I also, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, specifically there were 14 of us, and yes, like Manuel said, the SSAC is diverse in itself. We all come from 5 different clubs or 1 club, so we're all involved and it overlaps in a positive way.
I also was just upstairs with the SSAC, and they asked the question about the superintendent search process, as well as a really robust discussion on what's to come this school year. So I think we can all rest assured that I feel like I heard some future attorneys, some future electeds in there. The discussion was really robust. So are there any other questions from our school board directors? Okay, seeing none, Madam Secretary. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you to Mr. Valdez also, who, when I reached out to him, brought the group together right away. So that's another way I think you can bring them together.
Thank you. Let's give our students a round of applause. Madam Secretary, what is the next item? More applause from behind there.
The next communication is a report with possible action on legislative matters concerning Milwaukee Public Schools. This is an informational item, and although it was noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the Office of Board Governance please present the item?
Thank you, Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Governmental Relations from Milwaukee Public Schools. Excuse me. At this time of year, obviously, school districts across the state are completing their final adopted budgets. The board on Tuesday took that action. And it also is the time of year where we are right at the beginning stages of the next state budget process. So highlighting a couple of things as we enter into that season and some of the kind of the behind-the-scene details that I think it's important to elevate just to bring before the board and to bring before a wider audience that then will kind of carry through as we head toward June when we get the final state budget. But as this board took action and other boards have across the state to adopt their final budgets, one of the interesting things that we have in this state, unique things, and some might argue odd things, is something called the school levy tax credit. So you have that in the attachment of the item here. And what that is something that under state law, lawmakers say is funding for schools, but in the reality of it, it's a property tax credit. And so you have just been through an exercise where you have set the levy. We're going to deliver that to the city. And on November 20th or so, the city will receive a document that says, here's your school levy tax credit from Milwaukee. And our estimates at this point are that it will reduce the levy that was set on Tuesday by approximately $72 million. It's a very odd thing to do in a state budget process because you could simply deliver $72 million of state aid on the front end, and the board could have on Tuesday night simply set a levy that was $72 million lower, and that would have made more sense. Or if you wanted to actually, if you as the state wanted to actually provide funding that could be used to support education, the education of students, you could present that in a different form so that $72 million could be used. And as again, we're seeing throughout the state, if something like that, which is far more sensible of a way to provide education funding, would happen, you would likely see many fewer school districts having to go to referendum to get resources from their community to support their students. So just want to highlight that. It's something that the audience should know is outside of the control of any school district. That is information that's delivered to the municipality. And then when you open up your tax bill, you will get a form, and it may be a little confusing because it's, on top of everything else, it's not a terribly transparent process. So we're going to, again, move into the state budget process to ask that some of these things be done in a different way that perhaps makes more sense for students, or at the very least is more transparent for parents, taxpayers alike. But that also brings us into the fact that on November 20th, again, there is something that's going to be produced by the state that, oddly enough, is called the November 20 report. And this is a report where we will see what the fiscal estimates are that the state has for the amount of money Wisconsin will be using as it enters into the next state budget process. As we have discussed many times, the state has a significant surplus. And while I can't make any predictions, the way that overall economic indicators are moving, that November 20 report could tell us that perhaps there is revenue available to do many of the things that we in our legislative agenda and working with our advocacy colleagues are asking for from the state. And it brings to mind something that occurred yesterday. The Marquette Law School poll delivered its latest polling results. Obviously, we've got a very significant election happening on Tuesday. Much of the talk was around the presidential election, state senate. But the one state-level policy item that Charles Franklin, who authors the poll, brought forward is the question that we continue to see in the state, which is, and I want to be clear here, the question is not phrased by the Marquette Law School poll in this way. It's more of a reflection of state policy. And the reflection is we've got more or less a property tax limitation system that masquerades as a school funding system. And it's been that way since 1993 with revenue limits. And so it puts this dynamic in place between property taxes and school funding. And essentially the fight and the policy fight we get into in the state budget is between property taxes and school funding, as if we can only decide one or the other. But that is a false choice, because we know that if we funded things differently, you could do both. And I think school districts, there are over 100, I think there are around 147 operating referendum questions that are going. We have 421 school districts, as I mentioned before. We have 147 operating referendum questions because school districts need to go to their communities to ask for funding because the state has so thoroughly underfunded our students over the last 5 years in particular, but certainly over the last 16. But there's a different way we could do this. We could put the funding in place in such a way that has a positive impact on property taxes and actually allows us to fund our kids. We could move, in the last budget, instead of putting $255 million more into the school levy tax credit, you could have put that into reimbursing special education costs for districts. And again, the board has moved forward a proposal to advocate that we get a 90% reimbursement rate for special education, which would help all students. And as Senator Chris Larson has pointed out, if schools were properly funded on the front end, fewer would have to go to referendum, and that would have a positive impact on property taxes. So hopefully we go into this budget season and we do things a little more sensibly, and we will be pushing for that again. But just wanted to raise those issues as we are in the season where we've set our budget and are again kind of doubling our efforts on advocacy. So thank you.
Do board members wish to ask questions or make comments? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. So I know we perpetually ask for an increase in special education. Does there seem to be bipartisan support? Do you have any reason to believe that maybe this year might be different? I believe the Blue Ribbon panel that was convened under Speaker Voss did make this recommendation. So is there any reason to hope this time is different?
Mr. Thiel.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, Director O'Halloran, certainly always reason to hope. I think, we have, and this is not a partisan issue, right? I mean, wherever you live in the state of Wisconsin, we have school districts going to referendum, and I think there is unanimity, certainly on supporting students, but supporting students with disabilities in particular. As you mentioned, Speaker Voss's Blue Ribbon Commission recommended a 60% reimbursement rate. I think the Wisconsin Association of School Boards is with us in recommending a 90% reimbursement rate. The Department of Public Instruction in their previous budget was hoping to get us on a trajectory where in this upcoming school year, we would see a 75% reimbursement rate, and in the second year, we would get to a 90% reimbursement rate. The reality, however, is in that last budget, we are still left at a reimbursement rate of 32.4%, which places this is always a lagging indicator, so I kind of cushion this a little bit, but we could very well be in last place in the United States of America in how we fund students with disabilities in the state of Wisconsin. So, we've seen some indicators. The leadership over at the Milwaukee Metropolitan Association of Commerce in the spring, as we were going through the referendum process, indicated that they understood that there needs to be more funding for students with disabilities. So we're going to call on everyone to, again, push this point, and hopefully I would be remiss, I would think. We have literally marched to Madison, Director O'Halloran, as you led that march, to call on state legislators to improve this reimbursement rate. So hopefully, we certainly know there's a greater understanding and urgency around this issue. And so hopefully that actually brings some movement this time around.
Any follow-up, Director O'Halloran? Does anyone else wish to make comments or ask questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Thiel. Madam Secretary, what is the next communication from the Office of Board Governance?
The next communication is consideration of and possible action on performance evaluation data relative to the interim superintendent of schools. The recommendation is that this item be considered in closed session.
Madam Secretary, we will defer this item to the end of the meeting. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
There is one communication from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency, the monthly report with possible action on activities within the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the Office of Accountability and Efficiency please present the report?
Thank you, Chair Gokul Gandhi, Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. I'll just briefly highlight as it relates to progress under the corrective action plan, as Mr. Galvan had alluded to earlier. We've updated the website with progress on the CAP through October the 9th. That is now available on the OEE homepage for inspection. We're continuing to collaborate with the DPI and Baker Tilly to move the 23 financials forward. You had probably heard that there's a target date to complete before Thanksgiving, and I know the team is working very hard overtime and over weekends to work towards that target date. Lastly, as part of the corrective action plan, there was the establishment of an audit committee. Working with the city attorney's office, we had, I think, reached out to them in August with some initial policy review. We'll continue to work with them to get that in front of an LRP at the next earliest opportunity. And with an update in the audit services area, I have the chief auditor, Mr. Paul Guy, with me.
Mr. Guy?
Good evening. Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, Paul Guy, Chief Auditor, OEE Audit Services. Just wanted to highlight a few items. We did complete the accounts payable audit and are looking to present that to the AFP committee in November. Did want to give a thanks to the administration, to the finance team, Janine and Felicia. Looking forward to working with Aicha too as we move forward with corrective actions. Next month, we're also looking to give the committee and the board more of a sense, too, of the areas that audit services works in and give you some metrics around that process. And the other update I had was that I did have a chance to meet with the Governor Evers consulting team this week. Did give them an overview of audit services activities and what we're working on, and I've also offered our assistance to them as well as they move along in their review.
Thank you so much. Do board members wish to ask questions or make comments? Director Leonard.
So these are the two audits that were pushed forward through the governor's office. Is that what you're speaking to?
Office of OAE.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, yes, this is the financial and operational review by the MGT Consultant Group.
Any follow-up, Director Leonard?
Yeah, just real quickly, do they give you a timeline when that would be finished, when their audits would be done?
OAE, sorry.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, they are shooting for an end of January date.
Director Leonard?
I'm good, thank you, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much. Madam Secretary, what is our next item of business?
The next item is action on reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, student expulsions.
The chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the reports on the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Director O'Halloran.
I move that the board approve the 2 reports of the independent hearing officers as attached.
Director Simpson.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the reports of the independent hearing officers, Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
and Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That is 6 ayes. The motion passes.
We will now have the reports of the standing committees. Since public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 1, listening session on the implementation of school resource officers, SROs, as a result of Act 12, has been set aside at the request of the administration. Item 5, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside at the request of administration. Item 6, action on a request to approve prevailing wages has been set aside pursuant to Board Rule 1.14.
Do any board members wish to set items aside? Okay, Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
No item, this is report of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? May I please have a motion to approve the balance of the committee's reports? Director Simpson.
I move that we accept the balance of the committee reports.
Looking for a second. Director O'Halloran.
Second.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Simpson's motion to approve the balance of the reports of the standing committees, Director Garcia,
Aye.
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director O'Halloran,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Zomber,
Aye.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what is the first item set aside?
The first item set aside is from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, AFP. Item 1, listening session on the implementation of school resource officers, SROs, as a result of Act 12. Your committee reports have given the public hearing on the question of re-implementing the school resource officer program. The administration has set this item aside with a request that the board continue its consideration of this item in closed session.
We will defer this item to the end of the meeting. Madam Secretary, what is the next item set aside?
The next item set aside is also from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 5, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days. Your committee recommended approval of the promotions, appointments, and limited term employment contracts as listed in the attachments to the item to be effective upon approval by the board. This item was set aside at the request of administration.
Would the administration please present their comments?
Vice President Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Adria Maddaleni is here to describe some additions. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Gokul Gandhi, members of the board, Adria Maddaleni, Chief Human Resources Officer. We wanted to bring this item forward because we had additional limited-term employees that we wanted to bring forward for approval from the board, and we thought it was important that we do that before November board.
What is the pleasure of the board with respect to this item? Director O'Halloran.
I move we approve the promotions, appointments, and LTE contracts as listed in the attachments, the updated attachments.
Looking for a second. Director Garcia.
Second.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the administration's recommendations as presented in the revised attachment, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes. The motion passes.
Sorry. Thank you so much. Director O'Halloran, would you like to make some comments?
To everybody who is a new hire or who is receiving a promotion as a result of tonight's action, thank you so much for bringing your talents to serve the students, staff, and community here at MPS. Go forth and do great things.
Let's have a round of applause. Amazing. Madam Secretary, what is the next item set aside?
The next item set aside is also from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item 6, action on prevailing wage rates. Your committee recommended approval of the prevailing wage rates as presented. This item has been set aside pursuant to Board Rule 1.14, which requires a recorded affirmative vote of 2/3 of the board's membership.
Does the administration have any new information to add?
Vice President Gokul-Gandhi, members of the board, we just wanted to present an update regarding the prevailing wage, and then answer any questions you may have.
Vice President Gokul-Gandhi, members of the board, Adrian Maddaleni, Chief Human Resources Officer. Since the AF&P committee last week, we were made aware by the Trade Council that there was an updated rate for the sheet metal chargeman. So we have corrected that rate and have brought it forward for your approval.
Thank you. If there are no questions by board members, may I have a motion to approve the prevailing wage rates as presented? Director O'Halloran.
I move that the board approve the attached prevailing wage rates, the revised attachment, please.
Looking for a second. Director Simpson.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the revised attachment of prevailing wages, Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
Vice President Gokul-Gandhi.
Aye.
That is 6 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, are there any items of regular business?
Yes, there are 2 items of regular business. Reports of board delegates. Item 1 is the reports of the board's delegates. The first report is that of the board's delegate to CISA 1.
Would the delegate like to make any remarks?
The report is attached, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the board's delegate to the library board.
Would the delegate like to make any remarks?
That report is before you. Please reach out if you have any questions.
Okay, would any other delegates like to present a report? Director Leonard.
Report from the DAC is before you, so if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I would also like to add that the DAC will be doing a survey of their members regarding the expectations for the new superintendent, and I believe that will be on the 7th of November. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other reports? Okay, Madam Secretary, what is the next item of regular business?
Monthly report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. Item 2 is the monthly report of the President of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. President Herndon has submitted a report, and it has been attached to the agenda.
Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, oh, sorry. Yes, Director Zombor.
Thank you, Chair Gokul-Gandhi. I think Director O'Halloran. The report is actually accidentally the library board report, so we'll have to update that and then
Thank you.
maybe approve them next month.
Thank you so much for catching that. Was that the same comment you wanted to make, Director O'Halloran? Oh, thank you. Okay, am I missing anything before we move on? Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any communications for referral to committee?
We have one communication, Communication 2324C-04. This communication was submitted by Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield Plans of Wisconsin relative to the approval of the Group Medicare Advantage Plan.
This communication will be referred to the Office of Accountability and Efficiency. Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral?
No, Madam Vice President, we have no resolutions for referral.
Okay, Madam Secretary, what is our next item on the agenda?
Items deferred, Madam Chair, we are back to the items that were previously deferred. Both items were noticed for possible closed session.
Madam Secretary, would you please remind us of those items?
Those items are consideration of and possible action on performance evaluation data relative to the interim superintendent of schools, and listening session on the implementation of school resource officers as a result of Act 12.
The chair will accept a motion to retire to closed session pursuant to, do I need to ask for the motion first? Yes, I do. I should know that. Okay, I'm looking for a motion. Yes.
You have to
Do need to read all
I
the
do need
stat-
to read
you
all of
do,
that. You would
sorry,
think
the
that I would
state
know
law,
that
sorry.
based on what I just did on Tuesday. Anyway, pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, to consider performance evaluation data relative to the interim superintendent of schools, and pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent D, and 19.85, parent 1, parent E, to reconsider negotiation strategy and strategy for crime prevention and detection relative to the implementation of school resource officers, SROs, as a result of Act 12. May I have a motion, please? Director Simpson.
I move that we consider that item in closed session.
Can I have a second? Director Garcia.
Second.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director's motion to retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, parent D, and parent E, to consider the two items. Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Zomber.
Aye.
Vice President Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes, the motion passes.
The board will now retire to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85, parent 1, parent C, parent D, and parent E. The board may return to open session to take any action on matters discussed in closed session. Otherwise, the board may adjourn from closed session. Madam Secretary, please note the time.